Right before we jump into this video, if you want to take better pictures in only 11 days, I created a free mini video course that you can sign up for at froknosphoto.com/11 days. Jared Polin, froknosphoto.com, and this is a side-by-side comparison of the Nikon D850 versus the Canon 5D Mark IV. Now keep in mind that I've taken these both out into the real world during real world reviews. You can check those out at the links below, as well as download sample RAW files. But for this video, I wanted to put the specs side by side and then tell you which camera I think wins in each category. So let's look at the specs. The first thing I want to talk about is the image sensor that's in both of these cameras. The Nikon has a 45.7 megapixel full frame BSI CMOS sensor, where the Canon has a 30.4 megapixel full frame CMOS sensor. The Nikon does not have an AA filter where the Canon one does. Now, is 45 megapixels better than the 30 megapixels that you find over here? Now, that's a toss-up question. Sure, more megapixels may mean better for some people. In certain situations, yes, having more resolution can come in handy, but having more resolution does bring other issues that I'll talk about later in this video, but I also talked about it in the real world review. But in this case, we'll call it a toss-up, even though this one has more. Now let's look at the image processors. In the Nikon, you have an Expeed 5 processor, the Canon DIGIC 6 Plus image processor. Basically gonna do the same thing, so no check marks to either of these cameras. But now let's look at the ISO, because that is really the determining factor on which camera may be better. The Nikon is doing 64 to 25,600 natively and is expandable to the low of 32 and a high of 102,400, where the Canon is 100 to 32,000 natively, expandable up to 102,400 as well. So the Nikon edges out the Canon here because it does shoot at 64, which is a nice, super clean file. But keep in mind, more megapixels may lead to less cleaner images at higher ISOs versus the Canon, which has less megapixels. Now, I've maxed out the Canon when shooting in terms of its native ISO during the real world review and got some fantastic results that I was very happy with. In the past, I found that the Nikon has always given me a cleaner grain structure where it looked more like film, and Canon, on the other side, didn't have that same structure. But in the last couple years, the Canons have started to get a very nice noise pattern that really looks like and replicates film grain. So in this case, I've shot both of them at higher ISOs, and they've both come out pretty similar in my opinion. So I think either way you go in this situation, I don't think you can go wrong. So check marks to both. Now, you might think because you have 45 megapixels in this camera that it won't shoot as many frames a second as the Canon, but you'd be wrong. This does 7 frames a second, where the Canon also does 7 frames a second. But if you want to get jiggy with it, you can add a vertical grip to the Nikon to get 9 frames a second if you spend the extra money to get the Nikon D5 battery. You will get 9 frames a second. Now, you can also add a grip to this Canon, but that does not give you a speed boost when it comes to shooting extra frames per second. It just gives you a little bit of extra battery power because you're squeezing an extra battery in there. So check mark is definitely going to the Nikon because you can squeeze out an extra couple frames a second if you can squeeze out an extra couple dollars. Autofocus is extremely important when you are shooting photos. The Nikon has 153 autofocus points, with 99 of them being cross-type, where the Canon has only 61 autofocus points, with 41 of them being cross-type. Now, from using both of these in real-world situations, I didn't have a problem nailing focus time and time again. Sure, I rather have 153 points with 99 of them being cross-type, but that doesn't mean that the Canon isn't as good as the Nikon in this situation. But like a lot of the features where people were very upset when this camera was announced, maybe it could have had more focus points with more cross-type sensors, but it does not. Nikon comes out with its D850. It matches what the Nikon D5 does in terms of focus points and cross types. So in this case, let's go ahead and give the Nikon a check mark. Which one of these can take more pictures in a row? Well, the Nikon will give you 51 RAW files in a row, where the Canon tops out at 21. Now, why is this the case? Well, let's look at what memory cards these cameras use. The Nikon uses an XQD card slot as well as a UHS-2 SD card slot, and the Canon, on the other hand, uses some 5, 6, 7, 8-year-old technology, uses a compact flash card and a UHS-1 SD card slot. So because of that, because the Nikon has the newer cards, the newer card slot, you can shoot much faster because the buffer can clear the files to the cards because the cards are capable of that speed. Nikon definitely gets a check mark for upgrading to the latest technology, where Canon is being left behind because they use some 5, 6, 7, 8-year-old technology. So in this case, you get more shots with the Nikon than the Canon. Check mark to Nikon. For those of you who are not just looking to do stills, but also shoot video, how do these cameras stack up? Well, let's look at the Nikon. You can shoot full frame UHD 4K video at up to 30 frames a second with 1080 at up to 120 frames a second. So yes, all the lenses that you put on here, you put that 14 to 24 on to shoot 4K, you're gonna get it as 14 to 24. Now let's look at the Canon specs. It will shoot at a 1.74 crop factor DCI 4K video recording at up to 30 frames a second, and it will do 720 at only 120 frames a second. So based off the specs alone, it looks like and sounds like the Nikon will do better. Now I'm using the D850 right now on this camera in 4K to record me. We've also used this 5D Mark IV to do 4K video, and the files look tremendous, if not a little sharper. Even though the Nikon has no AAA filter, this Canon does a fantastic job with 4K. The problem is it uses a bloated file, and it also uses the older memory cards. The fact that it doesn't use a CFast memory card to transfer the data or use a smaller, less bloated file is really a pain in the butt. But at the end of the day, the video quality from both are going to be really good, and you have to decide which one is best for you. In this case, it is kind of a toss-up, but based off of all of the specs, I guess it's not a toss-up. I'm going to check mark based on specs the Nikon. Which one of these bad boys is going to be the best for continuous autofocus when it comes to video? The Nikon offers you a tremendous autofocus mode, and by tremendous, I mean not very good. The Nikon autofocus isn't very good. It hunts, it goes forward, it goes back, then it locks on, then it's not really going to track you very well. Whereas the Canon has what's called dual pixel AF, which I say time and time again is an incredible autofocus capability for video capturing. You cannot beat that dual pixel AF with anything else on the market. So if you're looking for a camera that's going to do continuous autofocus and do it right when you're shooting video, Canon 100% gets the check mark in the autofocus for video. One more thing about the video for both of these cameras, the Nikon shoots with a flat picture style if you would like, and the Canon has an option to shoot with C-Log if you get the C-Log upgrade or purchase the camera with the upgrade already done. The C-Log is going to be a better file to work with because it's almost like having a RAW file without being a RAW file, because you can do a lot more color correction to it in post-production. So check mark goes to the Canon. Now, in a category that doesn't matter very much, viewfinder coverage. They both have 100% viewfinder coverage. You can see right here that the Nikon has one of the tallest viewfinders and magnifications that you will find in a Nikon camera. But that brings up which one would be better at the wind tunnel test. Let's find out right now. Clear winner, Canon. Now that we got the wind tunnel test out of the way, let's look at the screen sizes. You have a 3.2-inch touchscreen on the Nikon side that is tiltable. On the Canon, you have a 3.2-inch screen that's fully touchable as well, but doesn't have a tilt screen. Now, where the Nikon wins big is in how many dots it has. It has 2.36 million dots, where the Canon has 1.6 million dots. Now, not only does the Nikon tilt for those people who want the tiltability, but the screen is really awesome. Great color, great definition, great clarity, and it works really well in bright light, where the Canon may not hold up as well in the bright light, so check mark goes to Nikon. If you're watching this, you probably own a lot of camera gear, but have you checked out my brand new app called My Gear Vault? It's the best way to input, organize, and protect your gear, and it's absolutely free. You can download it right now at mygearvault.com for iOS and Android. Now let's get back to the specs. Now here's an interesting feature that I wish all cameras had. The Nikon has the ability to have back illuminated buttons. So if you're shooting in the pit at a concert and you want to see that you hit the right button, you can just turn on the backlight so you can just see what those buttons say. The Canon doesn't offer you that, so check mark Nikon. Both of these cameras offer joysticks for moving the focus points and also custom function buttons, but there is one function that this Canon offers you that blows the Nikon out of the water, and that's the ability to set one of the buttons that when you press it, you go from continuous focus to single focus, or you go from single focus to continuous focus. Now you may say that doesn't sound like such a big deal, but when you're looking through the back of the camera, now I'm not a back button focus person. This is for people that like to use the front button for continuous focus or to get your focus as well as shoot the pictures. I can hit the button if the subject starts to run and be in continuous focus, and as soon as they stand still, I can press the button again and now be in single. So check mark goes to the Canon. Now, which one of these cameras needs to go on a diet because it's heavy? Well, the Nikon's 2.01 pounds, whereas the Canon is 1.76 pounds, making the Nikon a little chunkier. Now, is that big of a deal? No, that is not a major weight difference, so really, it's kind of a toss-up right there. But if you're looking for a lighter option, you may want to check out all the different mirrorless cameras on the market. And finally, the last spec is the price. The Nikon clocks in at $3296.95, and the Canon $32.99, meaning the Nikon is totally a better option for that couple bucks less. But in all reality, the features that this Nikon offers for that value is extreme compared to what you get for the Canon, for the most part. The Canon is a fantastic camera. Now this is where I tell you my final thoughts about which one I would buy. I've already bought a Nikon D850 because I'm a Nikon shooter. Steven has already bought a Canon 5D Mark IV because he's a Canon shooter. I don't think you can go wrong either way, but if you don't own either of the systems right now, I'd be hard pressed to tell you not to look at the Nikon because it pushed the specs of the future, whereas Canon took the specs of the past and put it into this camera and do a better job with the next one in the future. So it's a tough decision, but the Nikon offers so many great features that the Canon falls short on certain ones, but either way that you go, you will get great results. If you're somebody that's shooting video and you need continuous autofocus, you're going with the Canon. If you're doing static video and you want that full frame capability, you'll probably go with the Nikon. In the past, it would have never been a toss-up to say go with Nikon for video, but in this case, I think you can get great results with this bad boy. I know you can get great results with this bad boy as well, but in this case, I'm gonna go checky McCheckmark on the Nikon side. Now, I wanna remind you that I've done real-world reviews for both of these cameras, so you can look for those on the YouTube or over on the website. If you're on YouTube, give this a subscribe, a like, and a comment. Over on Facebook, don't forget to like, comment, and share, because sharing is great, and that is where I'll leave it. You can click up on the screen to get one of those real-world reviews, and the subscribe button if you're on YouTube. That's it. Jared, PolinFroKnowsPhoto.com. See ya.